center, you're going to stick it in the center and rotate it a little bit. Okay, so now that I've kind of stuck it in the center, everything's about having this as even as possible. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to my hands, and I'm going to put my weight in a straight line here, okay? So I'm going to get this a little faster, and so the clay is going to want to bother you around. So you're basically, I'm taking my elbows and I'm bracing them into my knees, and I'm leaning forward. Now it just kind of got pushed off. So it got pushed off.
Too much push?
No, it's just the moisture. So if I go like this again, it just, you can push it too hard where it does push off. So here it's going to be bangy, 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 right? So if I go forward like this, I'm just putting my weight and my arm, my elbows bracing against my knee. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to what's called cone up. So I press evenly on each side, and the clay is going to escape and go upwards. And what this does is it helps get the bubbles out of the clay, as well as get the clay evenly moisturized. I'm going to add some water. I'm going to always have one hand stabilizing and one hand shaping and forming. So I always have this hand stabilized. So it's touching my knee in the well. I'm going to push down. Okay, I'm going to do this several times. You'll sometimes feel air bubbles pop underneath your hand. If you have an air bubble, you will stab it and push the air out. The goal is to have this be perfectly centered and not moving. You can see it's centered here, off center, push straight, it's now becoming more centered. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more water, and I'm going to push and do another pull up, cone up. I go back to the base, I come up the cone, and now you'll see however my fingers are, you can see my finger marks, the clay will escape from there. I take my hand on the side, I'm going to support up, and I'm going to push down and cone down. You hear that's the bat just kind of jiggling a little bit. I usually am used to shorter buckets, so it's a little weird with it having to reach. So I'm going to do one more cone up, and then a cone down. My hand's kind of flat. Okay? Now, what I like to do is, that's pretty centered, but this stuff is kind of bothering me. I want this to be, I could take a rib tool or my finger and take off these little bits. I'm going to take care of the bottom. Now, we are almost done. You don't want to always be adding too much water. But right now I want to make sure that everything is perfectly centered, there's no jumping, and you have to take your hand slowly off. If you take your hand off, you can get it off center. Here you can see that it's pretty much perfectly centered. I can clean the wheel as I go. Okay, so there the clay centered. Now you're going to do something called sink your well. So I'll get this going again. Everything with your hands as stable as possible. So now I'm going to sink my well, add a little bit of water. Okay, that's annoying. I take my two fingers. I'm going to get stabilized first. I don't go like this. I get my hand stabilized. I put my fingers straight down. Oop, I'm just squashed an air bubble. Okay. And then it's still pretty thick. You want about 1/2 inch thick at the bottom. You take your needle tool, you go to the bottom, the base, and you go like this. That's over 1 inch. It's still pretty deep. So I'm going to come in here, add a little bit of water, get the wheel going again. It's a little bit of a wiggle, so I'm going to center it. I'm going to squeeze down. And not only am I squeezing straight down, I'm taking my thumbs and I'm going to widen the bottom at the base. Okay? And you want to compress the bottom. And go from the center, work your way to the sides. Now I'm going to widen my bottom. So I'm basically going to take my fingers and drag them across and make like a little nook. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm sort of going like a hook across, and I made a nook. I'll go back in the center and compress the bottom. You want to get your bottom compressed and cleaned up at the very beginning. Take your sponge. Now what we're ready for is pulling up the walls. So the thing is that you do that on the right-hand side. The inside hand is slightly above the outside hand. I use the side of here. You can use your fingers like this, but your hand's more stable, surface area. You're gonna kind of squeeze in and go up. You're gonna do little squeezes and keep going to the base and then going back up to the top. So I'll get my wheel going. Not crazy fast, but decently fast. I'll get my hand here. I should probably get shorter buckets for this because it's hard to reach. So we get it right here. We're going to kind of squeeze in, and then I'm slowly gonna go and do what's called my first pull, and I come up to the top. What I like to do is to smooth out the top as I go. Then I don't ever really have to cut the top because I'm smoothing as I go. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. Okay, we don't want my hands to stick. I can add a little bit of water in there. And what I'm gonna do is squeeze down at this point. So I'm gonna squeeze here, and then I'm pulling up and doing my second pull. Okay, now my hands are pulling this way. Now if I pull outwards, the clay is always gonna go away from your hand. Okay, here you can see those little rings are basically called throw rings. That's the pressure from the inside of my hand on the outside. I always look at the profile, so I move around and see. It's pretty wide at the bottom, so now I wanna work on my profile. I can use it's pretty thick down here, so I'm gonna get my hand on the inside. I'll use my sponge to help me. I'm gonna squeeze at the base, and I'm gonna try to do a pull coming up. I'm also looking at the profile to try to get it even. I'll clean up the top. I'll come back down to the base, squeeze at the base, and then I'm going up along the sides here. And I have to hold my hands pretty straight. It's gonna be very easy where your hand's gonna wanna go out this way, which is fine. Now here it's kind of thick at the bottom. I know I can just take my finger. I can also use a rib and go like this, and I'm just gonna kind of cut this extra clay off. Usually a rib is probably better for students. All right, still wanna work on it a little bit. I'm gonna hang out here at the bottom a little bit and just get this bottom cleaned up. And I'll show you how to make a vase shape because I think that's really fun to see. So you can see I'm going really slow. You can't, once you get your hands on the clay, you have to go pretty slow. All right, let's say that my top was jaggedy. To cut your top, you take your needle tool, you come in on this side, and you're slowly, so it's a little bit off center, so I can recenter it. It's jumping around. When you recenter it, you're gonna do basically a triangle. You do a triangle, and it's called necking. You're making the neck thinner. I'm going to take my needle tool. I'm not gonna go straight like this. I'm gonna come at an angle, have my hand on the inside to catch it. And I come in slowly, hold it, I catch the clay, and I lift up. Then I can take my sponge tool, and let's say if this is gonna be a mug or anything, you wanna have a nice smooth lip. You're gonna put your mouth up to these things and you want it to be smooth. So take your time. Okay, let's make a vase shape. Clay is pretty elastic, so I'm gonna put a little bit of water. I'm gonna try not to do that much water because I don't want water to be sitting inside there, but I'm definitely gonna try stretching it out. So I'm gonna push on the inside. I'm gonna make this more like a honey pot shape. So if I come out here, I'm pushing, I'm changing the shape. I'm gonna push this, make this a little bit more round. And I'm also pushing and supporting. Now I want my neck to be more narrow, so I'm gonna take my cone shape, on the outside, my triangle shape. And this is making the clay thicker. You do this a few times, you get it stable, and then because it's thicker, you're gonna also have the opportunity to make your poles and make it thinner. So we're gonna do mini poles from here. So now I can take my fingers, I could do my mini pole, and I'm pulling up, pulling up, pulling up, and you know what? I'm gonna have this flare out a little bit because that's what vases do. They flare out at the top of the neck, and now you can see I can work on that and have it flare out. So now you can see if I stop it, you can see the profile where it's starting to look more like a vase, where it's becoming bulbulous, where it pushed out more pressure from the inside to push it out into the neck. And then these little bits will be sharp if you get fired. So what I want to do is move around, take my sponge, and actually carefully smooth it out. So then you have to periodically take your sponge and your fingers, make things round, and smooth these things out. Okay? There's a lot of tools that you can use, the sponge and your fingers being the best.